Okay, there's a green light now. Yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah, Charles asked me to do this, so I'm kind of here on request and here voluntarily by desire. Unfortunately, I don't have the capacity to welcome him, as in to make instantive, to welcome, to say, make yourself at home, in this kind of self-limiting invitation. In other words, kind of please feel at home, act as if you're at home, but remember that it's not true, this is not your home, but, it's where I am, you're expected to respect my property. So kind of to welcome Charles is a bit of a problem. So I'm thinking to go back to how I know Charles in his MS course in Shapes of Fiction, to say a few words about this. The course took the premise that it was scarcely possible to tell a story straight. A straight story, sequentially unfolding in time. So during the course that he taught, we endeavored writing a metaphysical phantom train, the phantom train being the only two structuring fixed words used in the course, to be aware, or to be made aware, or to try and be more aware of what was continually traversing the storyline laterally, kind of the fiction, the story, the shape. That is to say, instead of simply being aware of a point as an infinitely small part of a straight line, the course tried and tried to become more aware of it as an infinitely small part of an infinite number of lines as the center of a star of lines. Such awareness is the purpose of constantly having to take into account the simultaneity and extension of fictions, facts, shapes. And one of the very first lines Charles ever said that I remember quite vividly is, what is more immersive as a virtual reality than reading? Reading fictions as spaces of a polyverse of possibilities. And between conversations, the virtual real, the actual possible, the questions of impossibility began to gain a kind of unnatural porosity. I had asked him, it will be remembered, if he still slept. He said, now, yes, no, I have been sleeping, and now I am dead. No person present even affected to deny or attempt to repress the unutterable, shuddering horror which these few words, thus uttered, was so well calculated to convey. Mr. L. and the student swooned. The nurses immediately left the chamber, could not be induced to return. My own impressions I would not pretend to render intelligible to the reader. And here, unlike the protagonists in this story by Edgar Allan Poe, the kind of unutterable, impossible utterance of I am dead, I stand here and need to kind of simply make a status of welcome, a preceding to remark what will be and always has been, many preceding remarks on fiction, pre-meta, supra state of fiction. Yet I face a slight dilemma. By invitation, I've been asked what impossibly I cannot do to stand here today, welcome, hospitably, respect our house, speak in our language, say what we expect, adhere to our horizon, so we can applaud and be grateful for. There are drinks at the end, whoever stays, stays. Yet to broach this, Ote in French, for being hospitable, has this kind of double purpose, to act as both host and guest. And it's this dual condition that makes me ramble here. For pure hospitality or a pure gift to occur, however, there must be an absolute surprise, like a train which arrives whenever it desires or happens to do so, yet also it may never arrive. So rather than propose an invitation here, I propose a visitation. Visitation to imply the arrival of someone or something who is not expected, who can show up at any time. So I invite you to welcome the visitation, not the invited guest, Charles. But the visitor, one must be unprepared, or prepared to be unprepared, not the expected arrival of any other that might arise within our state of mind. I ask you to open your state of mind for these flowers of hypotheses to bloom. And so, is it possible to be so unprepared? I don't know. Any true welcome should consist in this opening without horizon. Without horizon of expectation, any opening to the newcomer, whoever it may be, whatever shape it may take, the newcomer may be good, may say things that are good, it could be terrible, for the devil may appear. And it's within this unknown that I ask you all to join me in this visitation with Charles and welcome him here. Thank you.
他跟豪豪分手了。豪豪就是有办法找到他，打电话给他，求他回来，反反复复，像咒语，像催眠，他跑不掉，又回来了。他告诉自己，存款里还有50万，50万花完了就分手吧。这都是他10年前的事了。那时候是2001年，全世界都在迎接21世纪，庆祝千禧年。
So what would happen if you gave opacity to the voice you hear when reading? And what would happen if you devised around this opacified voice a fantastic body or peripheral? And what would happen if in front of entities such as narrator, focalization, camera movements, gameplay, what will happen if you will find in front of these entities the existence of an unnamed heroine, and with her systems and instruments, and if through her systems and instruments you could tune different modalities or exercises of reading. So what if one of them, and what if one of them was to traverse any given shape of fiction within you or her or it eyes or visa, the vanishing point of an unknown form, or reversely, to read from the viewpoint of a form to come? What if reading will become a possible ontology in the multiversal realm that reality has become? Solar reality, SR, VR, CR, DR, FR. So this conception, or this conception of reading will exist on the other side of writing. It might never become writing, it exists on the other side. And they have a common interface, which is the definition that was attained last time, so last number 1, which was so in this version of reading, you will traverse forms and detect, gather, possibly assemble operations. So probably the same way you maybe recently went through a bibliography to write a thesis. Here is a simple hypothesis that of something that could be called an operography. Simple, a bibliography of operation, aimed at the fabrication of a vessel for the adventure that is called thought. And it is precisely because you give, as you gave to the voice you hear, some opacity. You give some opacity to thought itself, and if you approach it then as an adventure, that fiction might play a core part in it, precisely because it loses its supposedly or supposed transparency. So if looking back at last confused dream of last time, and looking back at some of its escapes, they were, you might remember, the one of the crisis, or the Mallarmian crisis of verse, how he went from this image of a poem to this one. This, where the poem is measured by lines, poetic meter of 12 syllables called Alexandrine or Alexandrin, to this image where the poem is measured by nothing else than itself. One, you will say it's a poem in Alexandrine, and the other one, you could say it's a poem in Multiverse, which was the link with the second scape, the one of the comic book Multiverse City. Here, the spine. So they were linked by somehow formulating something about the multiverse differently. But if now, like through this simple notion of operography, you look back at them, they have something in common, which is an operation made on suspense. On suspense. So one here, the way you go from one line to another, from one verse to another, as a form of automatic transparency that it completely loses here. How do you go from one line to another? So what has been revealed is the white. The white that is not the absence of color, but that is the prismatic addition of all, and that become a milieu of apparition of the poem. The way the poem appears is part of the poem. The way it appears on the page, or actually on the double page, on the screen that a book becomes when open, is like almost the feeling on the filament of a medusa attached to its dome. So the suspense of the white, or the white becoming suspense. Here, these are some things you see on the spine of a series of comic books called Multiverse City by Grant Morrison, which was not involved in a crisis, or it came after a crisis of a multiverse, of the DC multiverse, but it was reforming a multiverse. And so you had, some of you remember, you had a series of 9 comic books, starting with issue 1 and ending with issue 2. And before issue 1 and issue 2, you had 7 other issue number 1. So how was it, so again, what it was doing is the way you will go also automatically between one issue to another was also becoming a suspense. Why and how it could have been numbered for all of this issue number 1. It was within this DC multiverse composed of like 52 versions of us. Each of them were coming from a different version. So the second comic book to be published in this series was coming from version number 16. On version number 16, the elder generation of superheroes have completed their task, apparently, and the enemy has disappeared. So their sons and daughters start dying of boredom or spleen. What it did can be lit by this scene from Le Mépris.
Pourquoi tu ne veux plus qu'on fasse l'amour?
Très bien. Allons-y, mais vite.
J'avais souvent pensé depuis quelque temps que Camille pouvait me quitter. J'y pensais comme à une catastrophe possible. Maintenant, j'étais en pleine catastrophe.
Autrefois, tout se passait comme dans un nuage d'inconscience, de complicité ravie. Tout s'accomplissait avec une inadvertance rapide, folle, enchantée. Je me retrouvais dans les bras de Paul, sans presque me souvenir de ce qui s'était passé.
Maintenant, cette inadvertance était totalement absente de la conduite de Camille et par conséquent de la mienne. Pourrais-je même, sous l'empire de l'excitation des sens, observer ses gestes d'un regard froid, comme elle, sans doute, pourrait à son tour regarder les miens.
J'avais prononcé à dessein cette phrase avec un intime sentiment de vengeance.
Elle semblait avoir conscience que ce moment, un mensonge pouvait tout arranger, au moins pour quelque temps, au moins en apparence. Et un instant, elle avait eu visiblement la tentation de mentir, Mais après réflexion, elle y avait renoncé.
Paul m'avait fait tant souffrir. C'était à mon tour de le tourmenter en faisant allusion à ce que j'avais vu, sans toutefois en parler directement avec précision.
Au fond, je me trompais. Elle n'était pas infidèle, ou tout au moins son infidélité n'était qu'apparente. Et la vérité touchant sa conduite était encore à élucider, sans tenir compte des apparences.
J'ai remarqué que plus on est envahi par le doute, plus on s'attache à une fausse lucidité d'esprit, avec l'espoir d'éclaircir par le raisonnement ce que le sentiment a rendu trouble et obscur.
J'avais souvent pensé depuis quelque temps que Camille pouvait me quitter. J'y pensais comme à une catastrophe possible. Maintenant, j'étais en pleine catastrophe.
Autrefois, tout se passait comme dans un nuage d'inconscience, de complicité ravie.
C'est pas comme ça.
So if you consider if you look at it, if you consider the issue number 1 of Multiverse City as the moment Camille undoes the towel, and the issue number 2 as the moment Paul's put it back. These two under SR, under solar reality, they will be consecutive. Between the two, between the towel, the red towel off and the red towel back, it will be a matter of seconds. In the film, it is a matter of minutes. And inside this space that has been opened, you see images coming from the past of the film, images coming from its future, and images that only exist within this space. Multiverse City, lit by this scene, takes the space between one issue and the next, something that is quite invisible if you don't opacify it. It simply was supposed to be a comic book series which issue would come up every month. So you're waiting for the following one. But here, the following one takes 8 issues to come, the number 2. In between, you have 7 issue, number 1. These for you to see, I can actually give it to you. What the image that is here is actually on the. You can have this one too. This is what you will see on the side, on the extreme left side of the cover of each of them. And it stands for the 52 version of the multiverse in which this series exists, and actually to which it gives a new form. And lit are the origin of the characters found within the covers of the comic book. 52 versions. One thing, and actually 2 things are common to all of these versions, is they are all attained by same menace. The menace is the same for all of them. It's called the Gentry, and is attacking every single version of the multiverse, and is 52 Earths. But as you see on this image of the spine, is that, might it be sunset or sunrise, is as if entering different kind of atmosphere. This central menace traverses each issue differently, but it is common. The second thing that can traverse the different version of multiversity, of the different version in multiversity, is the actual comic book you hold in your hands. each version can communicate, and the only way they can communicate is through the comic book. And since issue 1, what will become issue 8, so the last number 1 before finally the comic book becomes issue 2, was, I don't know if you see, was this one. So it was, if we look at the suspense, it was a double suspense. It was the suspense of what will be the angle of insertion of each issue within the volume of Multiverse City, and what will be the actual status of the comic book that at some point you will hold in your hand. So if you think again of Le Mépris, here you reach something actually formulated by, not exactly in this way, but formulated by its director, Jean-Luc Godard, is that if you need to observe the infinitely big, you construct a telescope. If you need to observe the infinitely small, you construct a microscope, or now like a Large Hadron Collider. But if you need to observe or attain or reach something in the infinitely medium, you devise something with fiction. So we could define the scale of fiction as being the infinitely medium. In French is moyen, but medium, there's also the sense of milieu. So the infinitely medium. And immediately something would appear is that, of course, what is the relationship, a link between the different scales? How the things that operate in the infinitely medium, how do they enter or how do they touch other scales? So we saw that Mallarmé described at the late 19th century a crisis he called the crisis of verse, where the verse, previously ordered and precisely measured, got broken, both in the form of free verse and in the one of poem in prose poem. But he always also added that the verse had not disappeared, even in a prose poem, but simply it was a broken verse playing with tones and hidden rhymes according to a more complex tierce. And remember, tierce being a kind of efflorescence. So the verse was still there, but the logic of its existence was following a more complex tierce, a more complex efflorescence. So between what was visible and what was its logic, things as if like sunk underneath, and you will have to find the new efflorescence. But then doing something that was not with with Throw of the Dice was that it was not as if like the efflorescence had reached the surface and expanded and became on the scale of the entire poem. You see, there was not the visible poem and its logic or efflorescence underneath or somewhere hidden. It's the poem became its own logic. You see, the logic of apparition of the poem is the poem itself. And if you look at the first page, if you look actually at the first page as intended to be printed, or according to the instructions sent by Mallarmé to the printer, poem is written above anything else in capital, as if it could actually be the title of the poem. Poem almost as a first name. So what was existing within a possible grid of its appearance before had become the adventure of appearing within the white of the page. The poem as the first name of an adventure. Suspense, again, trying to light it through two different sources, remember? And suspense of the lustre, suspension, and the suspense of the film noir. So two operation of suspense. So I just like go for the moment, like not really knowing what to do with it, but it doesn't matter. Just like two operation of suspense. And going from yes, how to move from the suspense of like how to move from one line to another, or from one issue to another. Again, the suspense existing where something that was taken for transparent and immediate. So continuing, trying again to find like where other operation could be connected to it. And now we'll remember like few video games. One called no, it's not Psychomantis. Psychomantis is the name of the one called, someone knows? One called Metal Gear Solid. Okay. Metal Gear Solid. And in Metal Gear Solid, at some point you faced an enemy called Psychomantis. And Psychomantis was a psychist. She could read in your mind or in the mind of your character. She could read in your mind. It was on PlayStation at the time when there was still a physical code linking the controller to the hardware, to the console. So Psychomantis was psychic. You will go left, she was on your left. You will go right, he was on your right. You will jump, he was above. And the only way to defeat Psychomantis was to unplug your controller from port number 1 and replug it to port number 2. So here, as the white or the space between two issues was revealed, here the room in which the console, the controller, and you with someone exist. To make a form of progress on one level, you had to shift to another. Another game called Sword and Sorcery EP. EP because it features a vinyl from its initial menu. A vinyl that plays music and that plays so it plays music and it plays the title at the same time. At some point you play, Shaman Huntress, and you arrive in front of a cabin and you met someone called Logfellow, and Logfellow proposed you to go inside and have some rest, and you do so, you sit down. Once you're falling asleep, you notice that the vinyl is above the chimney, the same vinyl you've been seeing like a few times before. And when pushing on it, it comes forward until like occupying the entire screen and flips over. And it flips on its side B. And you enter the side B of the game. The side B of the game standing for, within it, dream. And again, there are some things to make progress on side A. You are obliged to go to side B. To make progress on side A of the game, you have to go to its side B. But within side B, you arrive in a forest in a clearing. And there's a man playing a guitar. And he tells you his name, and the name is the actual name of the man who made the music for the game. But after you have completed what you had to do, or achieve what you had to do in this clearing, he asks you, do you just want to hear a set of music? No? And so if you feel so, you sit down in this clearing and he plays music. And remembering that then, listening to the sound from the computer, I plugged a jack into it towards speakers. The forest, the speakers. There was somehow a link made between, again, the room, its speakers, and the side B of a video game. Another one called, what's the name? Bientôt l'été. I don't know if it exists in English. Soon Summer. It's a game adapted from the writings of Marguerite Duras. And here, if you played with a controller, the X of the controller, along with like if a Sony controller, the X, the square, the triangle, the circle. The X, most of the time, will be to jump or pass or fire. In this game, it was to close your eyes. So, again, it's like the operation that you can detect from a controller of a video game, the function Y of the button X. In another one, called Stanley Parable. The space bar, with the space bar, you could like bend down, you know, and it had no influence during the entire game. You bend down, you just like lower your viewpoint, but one time, by bending down, you access not only another space, but because of the structure of the game, an alternate ending, just once. Something that is here, but is only as a consequence, only once. No. So, somehow these last two examples, and with Christopher, we drew something that might help, could help sometimes. It's like when I spoke about giving opacity to the voice you hear when reading, surrounding it with a peripheral or fantastic body, and that it might become. It doesn't. I don't have the word because you see, it will exist in front of like. It will exist on the other side of like an entity such as a narrator. So I called for the moment Heroine. It could be called opium. I don't know. It is. But what matters is like it has now like an opacity, and it has systems and instruments. One of them, possible one, is just an image, was to think of the phenomenon of reading through the actual gaming controller. So it starts on the left as a gaming controller, and it becomes a stain or a wake. I don't know what you see in it. And it was like attributing like on the model of like the function y of the button x, was attributing like unknown operations. So you will have the meta camera, with which you will be able to function in the medium scale of fiction. So with which you could film with which you could observe the film Alien as if it was the Nostromo spaceship. You would have a state of fiction modulator going from cut flower, crystal, iceberg, the inner graffiti, all the notes you make, the stylus, this strange object that you find also now, I mean, not now, that you used to find in a hard disk. It's called, like, I think, reader-writer. So it's an object that both writes and reads. It is the same that engraves the vinyl as it is reading it. The out plug, folding, regard dans le vague, that translates in English into stare into space, I think. Stare into space? Yeah. Regard dans le vague, it's not the same. Stare into space, and which was somehow like linked to the moment when you exit the sea. I mean, if it's a salted sea, and when one medium evaporates into another. Bon, this is just a childhood sensation, but that like somehow the feeling that reality would only be encountered then, when one medium evaporates into another. And this another one. So why? Why this?
Prêter, si tu prends l'histoire de la philosophie, ça, il y a ceux pour qui, en effet, la philosophie est liée à ce mystère de l'amitié. Il y a ceux pour qui elle est liée au mystère des fiançailles. Mais c'est peut-être pas loin. Kierkegaard. Les fiançailles rompues, il n'y a pas la philosophie sans les fiançailles rompues, sans le premier amour.
Régine.
Mais comme on a dit tout à l'heure, le premier amour, c'est peut-être la répétition du dernier, c'est peut-être le dernier amour. Et la philosophie, bon, peut-être que le couple a une importance dans la philosophie. C'est très curieux. Moi, je crois qu'on ne saura ce que c'est que la philosophie que quand on aura réglé ces questions de la fiancée, de l'ami, de qu'est-ce que c'est que l'ami, bon, tout ça, bon, c'est ça qui est très intéressant, il me semble, enfin très intéressant.
Et Blanchot, dans l'amitié, il avait une idée un peu.
Ah, ben Blanchot, ça fait partie, Blanchot et Mascolo. Ça, c'est typique. C'est les deux hommes actuels qui, par rapport à la philosophie ou même à la pensée, donnent de l'importance à l'amitié. Mais en un sens très particulier, ils ne nous disent pas il faut avoir un ami pour être philosophe ou pour penser. Ils considèrent que l'amitié est une catégorie ou une condition de l'exercice de la pensée. C'est ça qui est important. C'est pas l'ami de fait. C'est que l'amitié comme catégorie est une condition pour penser. D'où le rapport Mascolo-Antelme, par exemple, d'où les déclarations de Blanchot sur l'amitié. Peu importe que... Alors moi, j'aurais plutôt comme idée que j'adore me méfier de l'ami. Pour moi, l'ami, c'est...
C'est le côté querulent, procédurier
c'est la
grec.
méfiance. Alors, il y a une heure, il y a un vers que j'adore, que j'aime beaucoup, qui m'impressionne beaucoup d'un poète allemand, qui est Entre chien et loup, l'heure à laquelle il définit le chien, entre chien et loup, l'heure à laquelle il faut se méfier même de l'ami. Il y a une heure où il faut se méfier même de l'ami. Moi, je me méfie de mon Jean-Pierre comme de la peste, je me méfie de mes amis, mais je m'en méfie avec tellement de gaieté qu'ils ne peuvent rien me faire de mal, parce que quoi qu'ils me fassent, je trouvais ça très drôle, très bien, très... Non, c'est... Il y a une telle entente, il y a une telle communauté entre des amis, ou bien avec la fiancée, ou bien avec... Moi, je veux bien tout. Mais si tu veux, il ne faut pas croire que tout ça, ce soit des événements, des petites affaires privées. Là aussi, c'est... Quand on dit amitié, quand on dit la fiancée perdue, etc., il s'agit de savoir à quelles conditions la pensée peut-elle s'exercer. Par exemple, Proust considère que l'amitié, c'est zéro. Pas seulement pour lui, pour son compte, mais parce que pour la pensée, il n'y a rien à penser dans l'amitié. Il y a à penser, en revanche, dans l'amour jaloux. C'est ça, la condition de la pensée. Prêtez ici.
So, here is, and it's not at all what he will do in chapters, in several chapters in his books called The Image of Thought. It's actually the reverse. What is beautiful is this very simple thing that you take philosophy, the very simple etymology, philosophia, from a friendship for Sophia. And the simple thing is it's also, again, giving opacity to things. Might there be words, movement, or places, giving opacity to things, especially the ones that seems obvious. Giving them opacity. So you give opacity to philosophy, to the word philosophy, and you arrive with something that is as much its etymology as it is turning it into a neologism. You know, this moment when almost etymology could be at the same time a neologism. And the simple thing, you will not know what it is to what philosophy is and can do if you don't enter the image of like what it is to be a friend. Simple thing, no? But what it is to be a friend, and with Proust, him saying, well, philosophy will never reach a certain state of thought, because friendship is too goodwilling. And you never think like through goodwill. You think through the encounter with a form of violent sign. So the friend is not the character of utmost thought, it is the lover, and more precisely, the jealous lover, who has to deal with the violence of a sign. But it just so, and another escape you could Marcel Duchamp went from the painting on the left, like in English, a sad young man on a train, to the on the right, to the what on the right. It's started in 1915, but to the what on the right. When writing on the on this, the large glass, or the bride stripped bare by a bachelor's even, he describes this. He started calling it, or he started thinking of it as a delay in glass. So, in his dialogues with Pierre Cabane, it says, yes, it is the poetic aspect of the word I liked. I wanted to give delay a poetic sense that I could not explain. It was to avoid saying a glass painting, a glass drawing. You understand? The word delay pleased me at that point like a phrase one discovers. It was really poetic in the most Mallarméan sense of the word, so to speak. It was poetic in the most Mallarméan sense of the word, so to speak. So it is here again the ability to enter an image. Once you say a delay in glass, you don't have to refer to a painting on glass. You enter the image of delay in glass. And what matters then, once the image entered, and probably, and again, the beauty of Temple Island and its image of devising a submarine or submersible to reach an image. Once you entered an image, it is somehow, it's not that it is waterproof, but it is reference proof. Again, this variation of the level of opacity and transparency. You enter the image, and what counts once you have entered it is to generate a logic. What you don't have in reference to something that comes before, you have to gain by constructing a logic. And the same way, the delay in glass became the projected shadow of a fourth dimension. The same way the white became a milieu. The same way the line of the succession of issues became a volume. It is that finding a logic is reconfigurating the place in which takes place. And therefore, an image is not anymore something you look at, but the emergent part of epistolary logic in which different versions of our multiverse send signs to each other.
No, thanks a lot, Charles, for a really kind of inspiring talk and slightly different from the way that you conduct the course that you do here, which, I mean, it's a more laissez-faire, like it's more of you happen to be there and direct and kind of drop moments. And I kind of curious throughout the talk and the way that you yourself perform, I think it's the right word to use, perform the talk in relation to, for example, the last image where you have someone typing in the kind of the ghost typist of you or another, and then the typing that you then enact throughout. And from how I understand, or how I attempt to understand fiction and the image and even the delay, and it's kind of this logic of the medium that you kind of engage with, it's really interesting. And I just kind of to relate it to the opacity, the kind of the layers which construct an image, like for example in the delaying glass, which what is opaque is the thing that you see, and the rest is kind of the transparent, which frames the view. So I was just wondering in relation to kind of layers of an image, and I mean, it's a bit expected from me, but the kind of the dust that accumulates on these layers, which, I mean, the images in which Duchamp himself does could be seen as dust. I mean, he has an image of dust on that artwork. So I was wondering if you can talk about this in relation to opacity, the layers of an image and opacity that one constructs.
So two or three things. Well, I know a little bit of very minimally of what you do with dust, but yes, I will say it's exactly like giving opacity to something, more like through dust. I know of Eleanor. I don't know what is happening now, but a few weeks ago I understood there was also giving opacity to the mask. I don't know where it is now, but like part of it was fashion. It's true, like when you look at the mask, or the mask of VR, it's exactly like it will be exactly the same as like going from issue 1 to issue 2, or going from one line to another in a poem. It is something that is not seen. But what happens when you start like opacifying it and like seeing it? Then, as with friendship and philosophy, I would say it becomes as an etymology as it becomes a neologism. Which means, like, for example, with the mask, as you enter the image of the mask, the given image is the diving one, right? Like you dive. I dive into another world, you know, with like this level of like imprecision. When you start entering the image, well, okay, you say, okay, if you dive, then like when you dive, when you come back, there are stages. Otherwise, like your lungs explode, no? Given a certain depth, no? So that starts to be interesting. Like, okay, so what are the stages of the mask? If I have to come back somewhere, if I have to resurface. So I mean, like very, and all of this was extremely, like, again, like I try each time to make it like less fragile, and each time I fail, like, and this time more than ever. But it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter, because if like 2, 3, 4 points are lit, it's fine. Bon, and then going back to the mask, so there's, okay, speed diving mask, there might be stages. But it doesn't have to be a diving mask. It can be also a Venetian ball mask, and what it becomes of like entering VR through a Venetian mask. And probably will change things that happens on the other side. The thing what I found, and now to answer quite, is this beautiful line, and not again depending on its original meaning of through a glass darkly. Through a glass darkly is from the Bible, but I find it like exactly. It's through a glass darkly, so it's not even the adventure of going what happens on the other side of the glass. It's through a glass darkly. The darkly position the adventure within the glass. No, the adverb or the adventure. Through a glass darkly, it's the adventure is within the glass. Within the glass, Duchamp said, well, the glass saved me by virtue of its transparency, but he gave like great opacity to it at the same time. And to such an extent that he could describe it as the projected, or we see the projected shadow of a fourth dimension. So through a glass darkly, it's I would say, in thought, and as thought is as to be, I mean, they probably are the other way, but is ultimately an adventure. It's what, it's also, even when you think you start from zero, and this is in a beautiful chapter of Gilles Deleuze called Image of Thought in Différence et Répétition, is, okay, philosophy might start, but and when it eliminates, how do you say présupposé? Yeah, objective presupposition, such as, okay, Descartes, I would not say like man is a rational animal, because it will be to presuppose what is an animal and what. But he says, okay, the only thing that then it takes for granted the I, the think, for example. And I think what he found beautiful in the idea of reminiscence from Plato was that it introduced time within thought itself. You see? So it's exactly this. So it was introducing the darkly in the apparent transparency of like thinking of something. But the thought of thinking of something is itself as thickness, and therefore time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to open this up to any questions, if anyone has any questions. No?
early on in the talk, you spoke of the psychomantium, but I mean, what I understand from psychomantium is perhaps very different from what you're referring to. So just perhaps clarification, because what I understand is deeply intriguing, and in the sense of opacity in glass and the subject and so on. The fourth dimension, I imagine you're talking about time and temporalities and so on. So, I mean, the psychomantium, that's a sort of part of the darker arts of foreseeing and so on, is the hall of mirrors, or the mirror room, in which at some point in the proceedings, the image, the clear image of your reflection is challenged. It sort of decomposes, and that's the gateway.
And that's the
gateway. Once your own, in a sense, the mirror becomes opaque, you see through your own image, your own reflection, and it seems that that's the opening, that is the gateway through to the other things that you might be searching. So, I mean, could you tie some of your themes back together around, I was sort of trying to do this through the metaphor of the psychomantium and struggling. Perhaps you could sort of redirect my thoughts a bit.
So, I mean, this is thank you, because I think I would actually, that would be my dream of a lecture. As you realized, I have like many problems with with things as they are. So what just happened is exactly this. I think it's how to think of something else when you think of, how to think of something else when you think of something, and it was a psychomantis, and psychomantis is a character in a video game. So, but at the same time, I was somewhere else through like your entry in psychomantum. But I have nothing. I didn't know even of the word before.
Or the experience, perhaps. You've never looked in the mirror after you have the experience.
But I know that is. That goes to something. I have a problem with mirrors. I would and I will wish for mirrors to be replaced by prism. I will wish for diffraction to replace reflection. And again, in thought itself, when you think of like the importance of like the image of the mirror, just in the notion as speculation, reflection, I would actually like to try, and somehow the voice you hear when reading and giving it a peripheral with instruments and systems, if it had a working name or a temporary name, I think it will be something like prism. In order like not to always go back to the reflection and the mirror.
Any other questions?
Good?
No? I think we're finished. Thank you.
Good.